This is Indian Country Today.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Trahant. Here are the headlines from Indian Country Today. The Senate continues with its impeachment trial of former President Donald Trump. House impeachment managers continued to press their case against the former president. Democrats showed new violent security footage to retell the harrowing attack on the Capitol. For indigenous lawmakers, the votes continue to fall along party lines. Recently, Democratic Representative Kai Kahele of Hawaii retweeted an account post in favor of voting to convict President Trump. CNN reports that managers have used video from as early as 2015 to show how Trump's behavior over the years has demonstrated a pattern of inciting violence. They have also made the case that Trump's lack of remorse is crucial to this impeachment trial. Thanks to strong moves by House Democrats, the Biden administration's pandemic plan now includes $20 billion for tribal governments. Political consultant Holly Cook Macaro, Red Lake Ojibwe, says tribes will evenly split $1 billion of the funding. A formula from the U.S. Department of Treasury will be used to help divide the rest. Macaro also says tribal advocates and leaders continue to convey Indian Country's continuing need for relief. The Speaker's office says it's working closely with the administration to make sure tribal consultation is complete before distribution begins. Democrats hope to rush the bill to Biden for his signature by mid-March. They'll be using a special budget-related process allowing certain legislation to be approved by a simple majority. The Centers for Disease Control is releasing new research which says wearing 2 masks offers more protection against the coronavirus. The research also says to tie knots on the ear loops of surgical masks. Those findings prompted new guidance on how to improve mask fit at a time of concern over fast-spreading variants of the virus. For the best protection, the CDC says to make sure the mask fits snugly against your face and to choose a mask with at least 2 layers. The laboratory findings underscore the importance of wearing a mask correctly and ensuring it fits snugly over your nose and mouth. The new information does not alter the CDC's guidance on who should wear a mask and when. In much of the U.S., healthcare workers are involved in a delicate dance, making sure they defrost COVID vaccines at just the right time so the serum doesn't get too warm, rendering it useless before it can be used. But in Alaska, those in healthcare are facing the opposite problem. Dr. Helen Hodges, Chief of Staff for the Yukon-Kuskokwim Health Corporation, tucks the vaccine in her jacket to keep it from freezing. The wind chill is around 25 below, and that causes the vaccine to freeze. And to get into some remote villages, Hodges is being pulled on a dog sled behind a snowmobile. The effort is paying off. Alaska currently ranks first in the U.S. for the number of vaccinations per capita. And more news from Alaska. Tribes in the state are applying for federal communication broadband licenses to improve their access to the internet. Currently, tribes are waiting for wireless broadband licenses that are offered at no charge by the FCC. The licenses are part of a federal push to improve internet access in traditionally underserved communities. A startup called Alaska Tribal Spectrum received a $100,000 grant from the Denali Commission to register Alaska tribes. The nonprofit's big push is to get rural tribes with poor internet to enroll on its website. Some faxed applications, others mailed in handwritten submissions. So far, the initiative has signed up nearly 70 tribes. Any unclaimed broadband licenses will go to auction to private carriers. Utah lawmakers are considering a resolution to retire mascots that appropriate indigenous imagery in public schools. A resolution in the Utah legislature encourages public schools to work with local tribal leaders to retire mascots. The bill encourages K-12 schools to emphasize education on the history and culture of the tribal people in the school's region. Now, it's not a binding law, but more of a statement of encouragement to schools to end this negative images. Representative Elizabeth Waite, who sponsored the bill, says the mascots, as well as the lack of education, are harmful to all students. The resolution narrowly passed the House Education Committee 6-5 and now goes for the full House for approval. And those are the headlines from Indian Country Today. I'm Mark Trahant.
This is Indian Country Today.
The Lakota have a saying, Mitakuye Oyasin, Translated, all my relations, not just to each other, but to our place in the world. We are all interconnected. This week we hear from people who honor this relationship: a rocket scientist, a health researcher, a chef, and elders in love, all passionate people. Aaron Yazzie is a Navajo engineer at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California. I asked Aaron about our relationship to Mars.
Mars is one of Earth's closest cousins, relatives. They're both rocky planets. We call them terrestrial planets. And what that basically means is that the internal makeup of both the planets are very similar in the way that they developed over billions of years. So that means that they have a core, a mantle, a crust, and the way that landforms and the surface of Mars was shaped is basically the same forces that shaped the way that Earth looks. So they have Mars quakes, just like we have earthquakes. They once had large bodies of water, which would carve out little canyons and arroyos. Like I said, they had lakes too. So all of these things are what shapes why the things that the landforms that we have on Earth, but it's the same story for Mars. So when we study Mars and its history and its geology, we're actually learning a lot about our own planet as well.
What was it like to see your craft land on Mars?
Oh man, so the first time I got to see something that I worked on and built land on Mars was with the InSight mission. InSight went up in 2018, and I built what's called a pressure inlet for that mission. And it basically is an instrument that helps to measure very accurately Mars's atmospheric pressure. And that helps inform the science instruments that are on board to understand what's going on around the weather and the conditions that are happening around the lander while it's taking very sensitive scientific data. And so, yeah, I got to be in a giant room full of a bunch of engineers with their families that worked on the mission. And whenever we send something to Mars and it's landing on Mars, it's actually still very risky, even though in recent years we've been very successful. It's one of the most stressful parts of the mission: entry, descent, and landing. And the reasons why is because Mars's atmosphere is so thin, and so it makes landing something, slowing something down from traveling through space at 12,000 miles per hour to halting to zero and landing safely on the surface of Mars is a very challenging thing to do. There's tons of things that come out of NASA technology, which is made for a specific mission to a planet for some purpose that ends up having a dual purpose on Earth. And so we come across those all the time. And that's what makes this job also rewarding, is that I can give back to humanity by learning this knowledge, learning about our history and giving that back to us, but also that the technology that is learned from it can also be used here on Earth. I think there are a lot of students and kids in Indian country that are interested in the STEM field, that are interested in space, engineering, science, all of this Mars exploration. It's something that I wasn't exposed to very much when I was a kid. We didn't have the internet growing up, so the only thing that was fed to me was maybe sometimes something popped on the news, but I didn't know anybody that I had seen go through that process and become an engineer like this. So I kind of excluded myself from this whole field. I didn't think that there was something that I could do or that was open to me. And so going through school and going to different summer programs, getting different internships really helped to just like clear my decision and clear the future for me, to show me that NASA is actually a possibility for me. And so I'm hoping that children now, if they are interested in this, if they are a creative kid, if they like to explore, if they like to build things, if they like math and science, even if they like art, if they like, it doesn't matter what you're interested in. I'm hoping that you can see yourself at a place like NASA, that this place isn't excluded to you. It helps, I hope, to see someone like me here doing the job, coming from a place that is similar to where they came from. And so I'm hoping that they don't exclude big parts of their dreams without trying first.
That was Aaron Yazzie, a Navajo mechanical engineer who works on the NASA Mars mission. We'll be right back to hear how relations impact the COVID-19 vaccination plan. A recent study showed that Native Americans are more likely to get vaccinated than any other race. And the reason might surprise some. Today we are joined by Abigail Echohawk. She's Pawnee and serves as the director of the Urban Indian Health Institute and the chief research officer at the Seattle Indian Health Board.
This study was one that we saw as imperative to do in Indian country. Right now that we know that all of the materials, all of the information coming out about the vaccine that's coming into Indian country hasn't been informed by our voices. So this study was important for us to do to ensure that the views of Native people were properly heard, that our voices were part of ensuring that we get the information we need on the vaccine. The thing that I think surprised a lot of folks that I was not surprised by is that 74% of all of our participants said that they were making this decision on behalf of their community, their tribe, their family. Whereas when you look at the rest of the population, and they've done and asked that same question in African American communities and Latinx, Hispanic communities, and also in white communities, and we found that to be much lower. And in fact, in the African American community, when asked that same question, are they doing it because it's an individual choice, or are they doing it for their community? That Latinx people, only 53% of them said they were doing it for the community, and only 36% of African Americans said they did it for their community. And that is, as a Native person, that's why we make our choices. That's our ancestral tradition, is to take care of each other. We are already public health organizations and people caring about our communities. So that was a real surprise to my partners at both the federal and state level, because they've been shaping all of their materials, focusing on what it means to make this decision as an individual, which means most of the information people are getting isn't going to meet the needs of Native people. So this survey was really important for us to do to make sure that Native people got the information they need. And so we've actually launched a vaccine health communications, letting everybody know what the vaccine's all about. And we're calling it Be a Good Ancestor, because we know that we have a responsibility to be a good ancestor to those next generations. Those value systems, which we were taught by our elders, by our parents, by our grandparents, and thinking about, we always take care of those next generations. We care for our elders. We think about our youth. That is innate within us. And so if we're going to be really working towards getting our people vaccinated, really telling them how they are part of ending this pandemic in our communities has to be what we're focusing on. And in fact, we're doing this better than the rest of the United States. When we think about across the United States in big communities where they can't even get people to wear masks, where people are like, this is my decision, it's an individual decision. In Native communities, we have more mask uptake. We have incredible public health precautions that went into place before anywhere else in the country. Stay-at-home orders, checkpoints on roads. We have done better than the rest of the nation on working to end this pandemic, because we knew that our communities mattered that much. So we're making these decisions on behalf of our communities. And if we are framing what it means to get the vaccine in that way, we are more likely to see greater uptake of the vaccine within our communities. And it's going to take all of us to end this pandemic and taking all of these precautions. We have a system in place. And as public health communities, I keep telling all of my friends in the state and federal levels, like, you should have asked an Indian on how to do this a long time ago. We know what it means to communicate to our communities. We know who our priority people are. We are always going to take care of our elders and youth. We know how to reach them. And the states and the counties right now don't know how to reach those who are most at risk for getting COVID-19 and dying from COVID-19, but we do. So nationally, when we've seen the vaccine rollout, Native communities are doing better. Here at the Seattle Indian Health Board, we have actually been able to expand and vaccinate more people than other places have done, because we've already vaccinated the majority of our high-risk Native people in the county already. So now we've expanded that to lower age groups, and we're not the only ones. We're seeing that nationwide in tribes and in urban Indian communities. I really believe that folks need to quit coming to us because they think we have all the problems and all the issues. They need to come to Native communities because we have the answers, and it's being shown in how we are rolling out the COVID vaccine right now in our communities. I think the takeaway is Indian country is doing best. Get this vaccine because you are being a good ancestor to your community. And also, if we are not using information and voices from Native people through the data, we are not going to be seeing the vaccine uptake, nor the prevention of other kinds of health diseases that we need to see in our communities. So make sure that we're participating in these data gathering efforts and fight for our people every single day, whether it be through prayer, through community gatherings and also participation in your tribal and urban Indian communities. So it's together that we're going to end this pandemic.
That was Abigail Echohawk, Chief Research Officer at the Seattle Indian Health Board. What we eat greatly impacts our health and ability to care for our relatives. Someone who cares deeply about food and where it comes from is Sean Sherman, a member of the Oglala Lakota Nation. He is the co-owner of the Sioux Chef, based in Minneapolis. Sherman teaches skills such as plant identification, gathering, cultivation, and preparation of indigenous ingredients. He believes that food is at the heart of cultural reclamation. His company is at the forefront of a culinary revolution.
First off, we launched our nonprofit kitchen called Indigenous Food Lab under our nonprofit called NATIVS, which is an acronym for North American Traditional Indigenous Food Systems. We've been doing a lot of food relief and getting healthy indigenous foods out to our communities around Minneapolis. So we've been serving 9 out of 11 tribal communities. We've been pushing out 10,000 indigenous meals every week with our small team right now, and that's been really exciting. And we're really excited to open up our first restaurant in downtown Minneapolis, right on the riverfront, called Owamni, which is named after the Dakota name for the waterfalls that used to be downtown, which was Owamni Amni. And it's going to be a really beautiful location for people to come and visit and try some indigenous foods. A lot of this work was just because I grew up in restaurants. I started working in restaurants in the Black Hills when I was a teenager and worked all through high school and college. And after I became a chef in Minneapolis at a pretty young age, a few years into that, I realized the complete absence of indigenous perspective in our culinary anywhere. And it's just like, where are all the native restaurants? You know, we have all this beautiful native culture everywhere. So we should be having restaurants that feature all of our diversity. And it really shot me on a path to try and understand, you know, what are indigenous foods and what are indigenous food systems and how can we apply that today. Our key goal with the nonprofit is just creating access to indigenous education, which was just the knowledge our ancestors wanted us to have of how to harvest plants and grow plants and hunt and fish and cook and preserve, and just all the stories and traditions that go along with that. So we truly believe in creating access to indigenous education and along the way just creating access to indigenous foods.
What advice do you have for cooking up a Valentine's Day feast?
We always ask people to just really think about the land that they're on and the history and see if they can purchase any indigenous products to support indigenous growers, and just, you know, make something that feels special and feels right at the moment. And, you know, we love cooking seasonal, and it's hard to do here in Minnesota in the middle of winter, where if you like snow cones, then we've got plenty of that. But we just really inspire people to just, you know, think about the plants and the animals around them and how our indigenous ancestors utilize some of our wonderful foods and create some new recipes out of those. Food is the center of so much, you know, and we need to protect that. And if we can get a control of where our food comes from, especially as tribal communities, if we can start creating food for ourselves, then we can truly, you know, have so much power to control our own destinies, you know, because food carries that power and food carries these wonderful stories that our ancestors have passed down, and we need to preserve those.
That was Sean Sherman, the sous chef. For Valentine's Day, we turned to a couple in Minnesota for their insights on love in a pandemic. How do they keep their relationship strong, fresh, and fun? Both have had struggles in life that could have prevented them from finding love or even being a good partner. So how have they overcome their challenges? George McCauley is a citizen of the Omaha Nation in Nebraska. He graduated from the Flandreau Indian Boarding School, and after high school, he worked, but for a number of reasons, he ended up becoming addicted to alcohol. He's been sober for 45 years. Sandy Whitehawk is Lakota. At a young age, she was adopted out of her home on the Rosebud Sioux Reservation in South Dakota. I asked Sandy what it's been like staying at home with George.
So many nights we've gone to bed and I've said, baby, are we fortunate and just blessed to be a couple that enjoys each other's company every day, all day long. And I even have thought to myself, are we what they call enmeshed? So enmeshed that we don't even know we should be sick of each other. But I think we worked so hard to be where we are that we enjoy every moment.
Had been in and out, been in treatment, detoxes, living on the street, and I'd been arrested again. And then I had to go to court, and they said that, you know, we need to do something to make your life better. And, you need to go to treatment, go to halfway house, I go 3 AA meetings a week, and stay sober for a year. I said, for a year? Yeah, it's not hard. I can do that. So I completed the whole things that I was supposed to do, and still going. So that's been an awesome thing for me, and it took those things to get me on that path.
I got sober too when I was 35 years old. So in that healing process, during one of my sessions that I had, it came up that I had never looked at that my adoption impacted me. I didn't understand that. And I, ironically, I'd been to all these counselors so many years, and no one ever even talked about or asked me a question about what it had been like for me to grow up as the only brown girl in this town and family. But in the long run, the way it impacted me was I had a fear of being close. I had this deep fear of being close. And George has the opposite. He had the fear of abandonment. So we were like the couple least likely to succeed, because if you don't figure that out and then nurture each other in your fears, then it's not going to work. But so here's an example of something I overcame. So George loves to hold hands. And he's very affectionate. And I was like, he wanted to hold my hand everywhere we went. And I'd be like, oh. So if there was a visual of what it felt like for me to hold hands all the time, like I could do it a little while, but not very long, it'd be like his other hand was around my neck. And in the beginning, I was even afraid to tell him that because I didn't want to hurt his feelings about holding hands. But eventually I began to understand where that came from, why I had such a deep fear and why it was so uncomfortable. And I now I love holding hands everywhere we go. But in the beginning, it was difficult. So he had opposite things that he had to work through.
I always like to share this part about how these stories, like during Valentine's, how you speak to somebody across the room or across the street or across the road, and it's love at first sight. Also what I really see is that we're so different. She's an extrovert. I'm an introvert. She used to drink Pepsi. I drink Coke. She has a PC laptop. I got an iMac, and she's on the east side of the house. I'm on the west side of the house. So many different things, but it works.
That was George McCauley and Sandy Whitehawk celebrating love in Minnesota. We'll close with a closer look at the sous chef's new restaurant project on the Minneapolis riverfront.
My name is Sean Sherman. I am the CEO and founder of the company The Sous Chef, based here in Minneapolis, and we are in the future home of the restaurant Owamini by The Sous Chef, which is going to be opening very soon. And we're going to be serving a lot of healthy indigenous food that's relevant to this area and being able to tell a lot of story with our food. We prioritize purchasing from indigenous vendors around us first. And we're just going to do a very regionally based menu that's going to be really focused on the foods and the flavors of right here. We're just really excited to create a menu that's going to center around that. It's just going to be an amazing project to be able to create something that is Dakota inspired on Dakota land and really tell the history of this land right where we're standing.
My name is Dana Thompson. I am co-owner and COO of the company The Sous Chef. We're really excited to tell the Dakota story, which we feel hasn't been told yet. And we want to do that through food and community and cultural preservation. Sean and I were really excited to get this project, and we didn't realize that we were also going to be able to develop a really incredible education component so that people are going to be able to come down to Waterworks and have a walking tour, being able to identify all these trees and plants that are actually food and medicine and ceremony and have so many different uses. We want the community to be really deeply involved in that and learn to identify plants wherever they are.
I think it's just going to be really important to be able to have an indigenous focused restaurant. So it's really going to be a first for Minneapolis to really kind of showcase a beautiful way to create a modern indigenous food place that's going to be welcoming, healthy, and also just gorgeous.
Sean and I started working with the Minneapolis Park Board and the Park Foundation in 2015. We've just created these great partnerships that I think are going to continue to grow and evolve once we get the restaurant open and start leveraging all the things that we can do down on the river. I just keep thinking about how excited we are to be able to tell the Dakota story of this land. There's been so much homage paid to the industrial history of this area, and the Dakota history has so much wisdom and beauty, and I think the time is right for people to hear it and to understand it and to incorporate it into their lives, because it's truly a message of sustainability.
That was Sean Sherman and Dana Thompson, co-owners of the Sioux Chef in Minneapolis. From all of us at Indian Country Today, have a great weekend. I'm Mark Trahant.
You got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.
Indian Country Today is recorded at the Phoenix Indian School Visitor Center in Phoenix, Arizona.
This is Indian Country Today.